Welcome. We want to continue our study of cherubs and the meta-narrative of the Bible. We want to look at a very interesting section today from Ezekiel. And when you look at Ezekiel 1, the interesting thing about this text is we're told that Ezekiel had this vision in the 30th year is probably Ezekiel's 30th year. He was to have been a priest, and 30 years is when you enter the full-time priesthood. You serve until you're 50, and then beyond 50, you spend your time mentoring younger priests. That's the law in Leviticus. So here, Ezekiel, who should have served in the temple, instead is exiled by the Kibar Canal. And when you look at Ezekiel as a whole, it starts in the land of exile by this ditch water colored canal. It isn't even a river. But by the end, Ezekiel is seeing restored Eden, and heaven, which is heavenly Jerusalem, and he walks all around the true river of life. So when you look at the beginning of Ezekiel, you kind of have someone who feels like, hey, my life is wasted. I was made to be a priest, and I'll never be a priest. I'm in exile. But by the end, he sees the true heavenly city. And I don't know if you've ever picked this up, but Revelation in many ways is just the New Testament version of Ezekiel. It's kind of like Ezekiel 2.0. You start with the problematic earthly people of God, and then it gives way to this revelation of this glorious new city, and picking up some of the same elements that Ezekiel had. So similar thing going on when Ezekiel turns 50, about chapter 40, I think it is, you start having the visions of the measurements of this heavenly city. So that it's happening by this Kibar Canal in the time of exile, I think is significant. Like what one scholar said, pointed out that even in exile, God has a chariot, and God in his glory can come to those who are in exile. And that's what's happening here. You have this chariot vision of God, and where cherubs were in the Holy of Holies, now the cherubs are associated with this chariot, this mysterious chariot that carries God's presence to his people wherever they are. And it describes these living creatures. Now, we don't know that they're cherubs here. In chapter 10 of Ezekiel, Ezekiel tells us that they're cherubs. We don't know they're cherubs now, but they're oddly similar to creatures who are described in Isaiah 6. Those creatures or seraphim. We'll look at that at another time. These creatures who are on fire, as possibly they have some kind of snake-like appearance, the seraphs anyway, and they're in God's presence, and they're doing exactly what God is telling them to do. And you know, when you look at that and you say, well, if heaven is like the Garden of Eden, what in the world are these seraphim, seraphs, doing there? Same word we're going to see of the fiery serpents in Numbers, and even in Isaiah 30, that seraph is the fiery, viperous, beyond a viper idea. It's odd that the cherubs are oddly similar and oddly different from the cherubs are oddly different from the seraphs. They have 6 wings, and these cherubs have 4 wings. On another time, we'll look at the description in Revelation. But all this is part of the biblical meta-narrative about cherubs. And so we see that they have 4 faces, face of a lion, an ox, and an eagle. One of the lower verses down from here says one of the faces is a man. And it's interesting that they fly and they cover their bodies. And that's really odd because this word body, just pull it up here. When you look this up, it's body, but it also can mean corpse. And Aquila, Symmachus, and Jerome, there's a question about what's going on there. What exactly this is talking about. There is a textual variant with a slightly different spelling there. But that's a rabbit trail for another day, I suppose. But these strange creatures are covering their bodies in the presence. I think the seraphs cover themselves with 2 of the 6 wings, and so you kind of have a reminiscence of the story. They're different from the seraphs, but it's kind of in that same class of beings, if you will. They're very quick. They fly around. They don't have to turn their head. So like if this is a chariot, this chariot can go in any direction. And somehow there are wheels within a wheel, and we don't really know what that is, but this is a chariot, and it can move powerfully, and somehow these cherubs are connected with seeing to it that God's will is implemented in the world. Now, what's really interesting is Ezekiel, who was probably crying his eyes out that he would not serve in the earthly temple, and God is giving him one better here, giving him access to this mobile chariot presence in the land of exile. God's glory comes to him, and at the end, that same glory is going to walk him around the true temple at a time when the earthly temple, we know because it's a dated vision, had been destroyed many years. So Ezekiel is seeing something at 50 years old, perhaps wishing, hey, I wish I could have served in the real temple. And God may be saying, well, the real temple is not the one you thought. It's a different one that's being built in heaven. What's interesting about that idea is this idea of the expanse over their heads of the living creatures. There was the likeness of an expanse. And if we pulled up a tool here, text comparison, and I'm just going to float this so we can see it all at the same time. Wonderful tool, Logos can do this for us. You can see we've got expanse, shining dome, like the sky, that's the NLT. The ASV, like a firmament. What's interesting is that this word is the word rakia, and if you're familiar at all with the discussion in Genesis 1:6 through 9, I think it is, like what is that rakia? If Scholars are right that Genesis 1 is describing the whole universe as a tabernacle. Then this rakia thing, whatever it is functioning the same way the veil functioned. And they're cherubs, keeping people out, keeping sinners out. And you can see firmament, something sparkling like ice. That's the CEV. Durames is the English translation of the Vulgate. I think this is maybe God's word. Dome made of crystal, firmament, something like a platform. And the reason all these words, all these different words are being used is because scholars are trying to get at what this thing is in Genesis 1:6. And you can see here's our word rakia. So we're knee deep in the weeds, aren't we? We've got these creatures. We find out in chapter 10 they're cherubs. They're connected with this mystical chariot of God. In Kabbalah, Judaism, there rose this Merkabah mysticism related to this cherub. I think the word cherub and the word rekev, chariot, I think those are the same three letters, but in a different order. So you come to this, and it's like, what in the world is going on? We've seen that cherubs exclude sinners from the holy presence of God. It's interesting in Ezekiel that over and over and over again, God is going to call Ezekiel Ben Adam, O son of Adam. And so it's like, okay, there's all this Eden stuff. We may get to look at Ezekiel 28 and that mysterious figure there, the king of Tyre. It says, you were in Eden, you were the anointed cherub that covers. It's like, oh my goodness, what is this? What's going on? Well, I think when God inspired the Bible, God is the ultimate engineer. He understands differential equations, foundations, stress, forces, gravity, time, speed of light. He understands all that. But he also understands artistry. God is not just the ultimate engineer. God is the ultimate artist. And artists on earth are clever. So would you think the ultimate artist of God would be more clever or less clever? Well, it's interesting to me that this rakia and the cherubs and restoration of Eden and Jerusalem and Ezekiel's vision, all of it, or a lot of it, comes to a head in Revelation 15. John says, I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass mingled with fire. And let your mind go back to that passage with the rakia in Ezekiel 15, because Ezekiel is there. He says it's clear. He looked through it. When he looked through it, on the other side, he saw something like a throne, and on the throne, something like a man. And you think, oh, God is giving him a vision of this mobile temple, and the veil is, Ezekiel's on one side of it, and the glory of God is on the other side. Well, it's interesting that when John, and remember, John, like Ezekiel, was in exile. He wanted nothing more than to proclaim the gospel to the world, and instead he was digging in a cave on Patmos, exiled because of some crazy emperor. And yet God, like Ezekiel, to Ezekiel, God gives John this vision of this heavenly Jerusalem, of evangelism having run wild, countless number, no man can count. What's interesting is when he starts describing that God's people are standing by a sea of glass with the harps in their hand. And if you're familiar with the Old Testament, you think, oh, this is really similar to the statement in Exodus 15 where they crossed the Red Sea. And notice they're singing the song of Moses. So it looks like the people of God had passed through these waters that are clear and yet somehow burning with fire. And you start putting that together, you think, oh my goodness, it's the rakia. It's the heavenly waters. We've been looking for the heavenly uncollected waters, the abyssos in Greek, the abyss, the bottomless pit, as Tehom is translated there in Genesis 1. And this rakia is somehow tied in, this exclusionary veil. Well, notice they aren't on the wrong side anymore. They are with God, and they're living creatures, 4 living creatures are there, and the people are singing praises to God, and God's elect has made it through. And you think, oh my goodness, the rakia, like the Red Sea, is parted, and the rakia parted on day 2, and Yabashah, dry land, appears on day 3, and we have these strange creatures, these creatures that we're going to see elsewhere that have wings, and I think maybe even one of the texts say that these creatures have 6 wings, and so it's like, okay, how does that relate to the cherubs in Ezekiel 1 and 10, and how does it relate to the seraphs in Isaiah 6? How does it relate to Ezekiel 26? You are the anointed cherub that covered. And the parallel text about the king of Babylon, perhaps in Isaiah 13. And all of it connected with these strange creatures on the Ark of the Covenant in Exodus 25 and following. And of course, all of that picking up the cherubs who are excluding willful sinners from the garden of pleasure. So all these texts are connected. So here's the question. Here's the question that I want you to wrestle with. How are they connected? And what does it all mean? Hey, thanks for watching these videos. I really have enjoyed making them and the interaction. Those are some of my ideas. What are your ideas? Look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks.